Good morning, Brewers fans. Welcome back to Brew Pod Between the Lines podcast. This is your host, Caden Adsit. And the Brewers even the series at one game apiece following a victory last night. And they will play the rubber match here later this afternoon against the Tampa Bay Rays. But my goodness, do we have some stuff to talk about here today. A lot that has unfolded in the last 2 or 3 games for the Milwaukee Brewers, specifically on the umpiring side of things. Just some really crazy things called that I have never seen before, and spent some time diving into some of these things and really kind of trying to break down what has happened. And just feels like, as a Brewers fan, there's a little bit of frustration in the fact that all these calls have been going against the Brewers that likely weren't even the correct call. And it just seems like some really poor umpiring and decisioning made by the umpiring crew that we've seen specifically in this series in the last couple days. But just some really weird things. And we'll dive into more of the specifics here, and I'll kind of give my thoughts and regards to what I think happened and what I think about the things that took place here. But I just really hope that the MLB, I understand that they don't necessarily fire umpires or discipline them by, sending them down. I completely understand that. I just really hope that the MLB sits them down and goes over this stuff and tries to make these things right, because the fact that these calls are significantly changing the game for the Brewers in the last 2 out of 3 games. Luckily, it could have easily made a big turning point in yesterday's game. Luckily, they were able to get over that hump with a pretty big offensive breakout day and some good pitching following Freddie Peralta. But it almost just seems like the umps are trying to make it so hard for the Brewers right now, and there needs to be some things, I think, some time spent on. At least the MLB needs to sit down, analyze these things that happen, and see what they can do to fix these calls, because there are just some things that are occurring and going on that just can't be allowed, I don't feel like, in today's game, and it's really frustrating from a fan standpoint as well. So with that, we'll kind of dive into a little bit of what's taken place. We did see Tyler Black. He got called up to make his MLB debut yesterday, so really good to see him. He ended up having a really nice day. But like I said, we'll dive into starting with Monday's game. We haven't talked about that yet. So Brewers lose this game 1-0. They get shut out for the first time this season. Really, overall, just an excellent pitching duel between Bryce Wilson and Ryan Pepio in this game. Wilson for the Brewers in his third start. He goes 6 innings pitched, giving up 1 run on 6 strikeouts. And really the only point in this one where he had any type of struggle would have been in those first 3 batters. He began this game with a hit by pitch and then a couple of walks to follow that before inducing a ground ball that scored the run there for the Rays, and then following that with a strikeout to strand that runner at third. So all told, a really solid outing from Bryce Wilson. We saw his pitch count get up to 90-plus pitches for the first time since 2022. So just some really positive things, and hopefully he's able to continue filling out some of this starting rotation as we hopefully start to get guys like DL Hall back here in the coming days. Hopefully Jacob Junis is on his way back. So just really making some really positive starts out of the starting rotation, making some good fill starts, and maybe with what he's showing, maybe this is a guy that we keep in there for the remaining of the season in the rotation, barring any injuries or whatnot. But the one nice thing that I was also really able to see that he was able to keep was the velocity throughout his start. I think with getting that pitch count ramped up to the highest it's been, sometimes there's a little bit of a concern as to whether or not he will be able to maintain that same velocity. But we did not see any of that issue. He was pretty consistent with the fastball sinker at 94, 95 miles an hour, which is actually even a tick higher than what we've seen in some of the other bullpen outings he's had. So I just think he pretty much seemed to get stronger as the game went on, and that is exactly what you want to see out of a starter, and hopefully he's able to kind of look past that rough stretch of the first 3 batters. William Contreras did a really nice job of settling him down in this one. And so just still some really positive things. in this game. And then for Ryan Pepio, got to tip your hat to him. He had an excellent game and just outplayed Bryce Wilson by a little bit there. He ends up going 6 innings pitched with 7 strikeouts and does not surrender a run. He ends up getting credited with the win in this one. A little bit sad to see Bryce Wilson get handed the loss in this game, but nonetheless, just still some really positive things that the Brewers can walk away from this game with. We saw Brian Hudson throw another 2 solid innings. Trevor McGill threw another solid inning out of the bullpen as well. Not really much to talk about offensively in this one. Obviously, the shutout in this one, only 3 hits recorded by the Brewers offense, one of those being in the first inning. And how about the defense in this one? William Contreras really hasn't had a ton of success with caught stealing so far in this year, but he's really done a good job of holding runners at first base, and the Brewers pitching staff overall has done a pretty good job of holding runners. But in this one, William Contreras records 3 caught stealing, and then there was also a pickoff by Brian Hudson in this game. So just an excellent job by the defense. William Contreras had a couple of these plays go to review, both of which were upheld and were called out in the Brewers fashion. But just some really positive things. I don't know what it is that we continue to bounce back to this topic about the Brewers catching coach. But whoever is responsible, specifically, I'm sure there's a couple different guys doing this that are responsible for developing these catchers in the Brewers system, have done such an excellent job. William Contreras, when he came over to the Brewers, was not known as a good defensive catcher, primarily known for his offense, which he has continued to do ever since becoming a Brewer. But he has put himself in the conversation as one of the better defensive catchers in the league as well. Between that and his caught stealing, holding runners, and between his ability to frame pitches, one of the better ones in the league last year, and carrying into this year for that stat. I mean, just some fantastic things that we've seen from the Brewers management and being able to develop these catchers. We've seen Gary Sanchez have a little bit of success behind home plate this year. He's typically not had a bunch of success behind home plate in his tenure with the Yankees and the Twins and some of the other teams. So we hope to see that continue. Just wanted to point that out and put some emphasis on that point, that Brewers had some really good defense in this one. Just really the offense was not able to muster a run off in this game, which leads us into the umpiring call and kind of the feud that happened in this game in the 9th inning. So all started, we had Sal Frelick with a leadoff double in the bottom of the 9th, So Brewers down 1-0 at this point, get the leadoff double by Sal, feeling like there's a chance here to scratch a run across. We end up seeing Sal Frelick advance to third base on a steal with Jake Bauers at bat. And then this is the at-bat where everything kind of broke loose. We see a strike 3 swinging by Jake Bauers on a ball that gets past the catcher, but on the backswing of Jake Bauers, he clips the catcher for the Tampa Bay Rays on the helmet, and home plate umpire Ryan Additon calls batter's interference on the backswing and then records Jake Bauers as the second out of the inning, and more importantly, sends the game-tying run Sal Frelick back to third base at this point. So just to kind of break this down for anybody that wasn't able to see this, or even for the people that did see this replay, from what I saw and from what the replay obviously shows, is Jake Bauers swings and misses at this pitch. The ball goes through the legs of the catcher and begins its path to the backstop behind home plate. And the contact from Jake Bauers' backswing does not clip the catcher of the Tampa Bay Rays until after the ball is already past him. So I just don't fully understand how the umpires made the decision to call batter's interference and send Sal Frelick back to third base, because, I can completely understand if the backswing would have impeded the catcher or, knocked him over or done something to completely alter the play in this case, but there was nothing in the backswing interference that would have changed anything. It's not like Jake Bauers' backswing clipped his head so hard that it knocked him over or, caused an injury or anything. But the ball was already past the catcher. Sal Frelick had already read it, was already halfway, to home plate basically by the time the backswing actually clipped the catcher. And whether or not the backswing would have clipped the catcher would have not changed this at all. Jake Bauers would have beaten the strike three swinging dropped ball to first base. Sal Frelick would have scored. Willie Adames would have advanced to third. And so I just don't understand how you call batter's interference really on a call where the play has already happened. It's kind of like one of those cases where at second base on an interference call, which they have worked on this in fixing this call, but if there's a play at second base and there's not potential for a play at first base, let's say you have a fast runner, he's going to beat it out at first base no matter what, whether there's an interference or not. A lot of times the umps won't call an interference if there's, some kind of slide that happens or something like that, if there was no possible way for the run to be recorded out at first base. So that's why I don't understand why that same rule doesn't apply here. How come, just because the backswing clipped the catcher of the Tampa Bay Rays, which really the only reason this happened was because the catcher of the Tampa Bay Rays was leaning forward to catch the ball and block the ball before it bounced in the dirt. And without that happening, Jake Bauer's backswing likely wouldn't have occurred. So you could almost deem that this incidental contact came mainly directly from the catcher, making that move and trying to block that ball. So just a lot of things in this one that were really frustrating. We see Pat Murphy, he gets ejected for the first time. And this was the second game in a row where it just seemed like a call completely changed the outcome of the game. Obviously, in that game before that, against the New York Yankees, we saw Aaron Judge slide into second base with his hand up and basically block the ball as if you were in basketball. It's just frustrating as a fan to watch the umpires make such a significant call that alters the outcome of the game. And realistically, in back-to-back games, making calls that didn't go the Brewers' way in calls that frankly, I believe were incorrect. And I really hope that the MLB does take some more time to look into this and dig into at least trying to figure out or at least give some kind of voice as to what happened. Obviously, the Aaron Judge game, they did come back right away and mention that they were incorrect on the call, which was a good thing to hear from the fan standpoint. But you just wish that they are able to clean this up and fix this up enough that the correct call can be called in the game and not be deemed until after the game. And another just crazy thing that we saw in this game too that I found really interesting and don't think that I've ever seen this before either. The line drive that was hit by Joey Ortiz that hit the foul line on the third base side, which was deemed a fair ball after review. You can see in the replay on the line drive, the third base umpire was not even looking at the ball. He's looking at third base. The ball has already gone way past him. On a line drive, there was no, it wasn't a ground ball. It's not like the ball was bouncing in front of the plate or anything like that. But he just flat out missed the call. He just was not looking at the ball when the ball hit the line down the third base line. And it just almost makes it seem like these umpires aren't really focusing and paying full attention on the game at hand and what's going on. Luckily they were able to go to review and make the correct call on this one. That's part of the reason we have review. But it's just frustrating that amongst having review that an interference call is also just called strictly on an umpire's opinion on what happened in that moment. And I do understand and I do credit these umpires for making some of these calls under pressure, especially with the fan bases and these things happening in a split second. I don't think I could do it, and I'm not going to sit here and pretend like I could. But at the same point, I just feel like these umpires need to be better. We need to clean this stuff up because these calls need to be figured out. And you just wish that calls like this aren't what ultimately determines the game. In this case, you would have had runners at first and third, one out, and the tying run already scored, with Blake Perkins coming up to the plate and feeling like you have a pretty good chance and feeling of winning this game. So, like I said, I'm not going to sit here and say that the Brewers couldn't have done a lot of things differently to win this game. That's totally not the case. There were still a lot of points of emphasis on the offense that they could have done a little bit better with some of their at-bats, but also Ryan Pepio did a great job. And like I said, you just wish that calls like this wouldn't be the ultimate determination of who wins the game because in this case, in the worst case scenario, it would have at least sent this game into extra innings, which the Brewers have been pretty good in those games so far this season. So, not too much more to be said about that. Diving into Tuesday's game, Brewers able to bounce back in this one. They win this game 8-2, despite some more poor umpiring calls in this one. Peralta goes 5 1/3 innings of 1-run ball and was cruising, frankly, going into the 6th inning before hitting Jose Siri in the leg. And after an umpire meeting, Chris Guccione came out, brought a lot of the umpiring crew in. They had a little bit of a discussion, and I think we were all thinking that maybe a warning was going to be issued, because what ended up happening in this one was the one run that Freddie Peralta had given up was a home run in the 3rd inning to Jose Siri, who has had a little bit of a poor reputation in the majors thus far in his career. And Freddie Peralta did not take too much appreciation to the way Jose Siri reacted at hitting this home run. I personally didn't think that it was anything too extreme. Jose Siri just kind of dropped the bat and started walking a little bit rather than getting into his jog right away, which I know tends to tick off pitchers. But in today's game, that's kind of the way that you show up a pitcher. It seems to kind of be the way that the game is played now. Pitchers do somewhat of the same thing with the stare down sometimes, or some kind of a little celebration on the mound, depending on who they're facing. So I didn't think I saw anything too bad there, or too horrendous in terms of bad sportsmanship or poor sportsmanship. But then in the 6th inning, Freddie Peralta hits him in the leg on a 3-0 count of all counts, which, yes, it maybe could have been intentional, I suppose. I personally do not believe that it was an intentional hit by pitch to Jose Siri. But ultimately, Chris Guccione gets together, gathers the umpiring crew, and determines that it was intentional. But rather than issuing a warning of any kind, he surprisingly, I think to everybody's surprise, including Freddie Peralta, William Contreras, Willie Adames that were out on the mound, and Pat Murphy, ejects Freddie Peralta, and Pat Murphy was not having any of it. He came right out and started giving his mouthful right away, gets ejected for a 2nd straight game. So just a really poor decision on the umpiring side, I think, in this one. I'm not exactly certain how Chris Guccione can determine that was an intentional hit by pitch, especially without, giving out warnings prior to anything that happened. I don't think there was anything major that took place before this that would have, like I said, the home run, I can understand. I don't think Freddie Peralta was trying to intentionally hit him. But even then, I don't understand how Chris Guccione is the only person in the stadium that deems him as intentionally hitting Jose Siri. So a little bit of frustration there, just another poor call. Elvis Peguero had to come in straight from the bullpen without getting any kind of warm-up. Obviously got as much time as he needed to warm up. But it just seemed like with Freddie Peralta cruising, he had his pitch count in the low 60s in the 6th inning at this point. Had already recorded 7 strikeouts. So just seemed like the umps were almost trying to tip the scales once again in the other team's favor, in allowing the chance for the momentum to switch, because with Peralta coming out and a new arm coming in, I'm sure any pitcher looked good to these Tampa Bay Rays hitters besides Freddie Peralta at this point, who was cruising. So Jose Siri did end up coming around to score later in this inning, so that run did get credited to Freddie Peralta, but he ultimately finished with the victory in this one. And then with that, we will talk about some of the other things that happened in this game. That was definitely one of the more exciting ones, but there was one other point of emphasis that was really exciting and kind of interesting that we'll talk about here as we wrap up. But switching to the offensive side quick, Tyler Black, like I mentioned, makes his major league debut. He ends up recording 2 hits both in lefty-lefty matchups. And all of his at-bats, I thought, and all 4 at-bats were very positive at-bats. In his 3rd at-bat, he nearly missed a solo home run off of a left-handed pitcher. And then in his 4th at-bat, which was off of a righty, he hits a line drive on a 3-1 count out to the left fielder. And if there was anything that we were able to gather from this game from him, it was that the fact that his bat-to-ball skills are superb seems to be true. I mean, he was putting bat-to-ball, barrel-to-ball for that matter, solid contact every at-bat. And then how about also having his parents in the stadium, his dad basically announcing his at-bat in his 2nd at-bat, and being able to call his hit and kind of credit his son. What a moment for that family. Really awesome thing to see and be able to watch that happen on live television. So just an exciting thing from that standpoint as well. Great game for him. Congrats to him on getting the call-up and getting his first couple hits in his first game in the majors. Willy Adames, hopefully breaking out in a little bit of a funk. He hits a 3-run home run and tallies 4 RBIs total in this one. Gathers a couple of walks as well. So hopefully he's able to kind of break out of this funk. We saw him hit a sac fly, that home run, and just some positive at-bats for him. Bryce Terang, he stays hot. He gets a couple of hits on some left-handed pitching as well and tallies 3 RBIs in this one. So really some of the left-handed batters going up against left-handed pitchers getting the success in this one, which typically is not the case, but really good to see our batters, despite everything that was happening, put together some good at-bats and pull out a win in this one in a pretty big offensive day. So jumping back to what happened then later on in this game. So we see Abner Uribe coming in. He comes in out of the bullpen, records a ground out to begin the 7th inning there against Jose Siri, and proceeds to stare him down a little bit, gave him a little bit of a stare down as Jose Siri walked by, and didn't say a word, didn't mention anything, and then Jose Siri kind of started barking at him, saying some words and running his mouth a little bit, and then all of a sudden, all we see Abner Uribe. He swings once, Jose Siri swings, and then benches clear, and a fight breaks out. And part of me thinks that this is all to do with the call that was made from the umpiring crew. I think the ejection to Freddie Peralta kind of led to probably Abner Uribe having a little bit of frustration from Jose Siri a little bit, and also from Jose Siri kind of disrespecting Freddie in that first at-bat. So you do like to see Abner Uribe. Personally, I like to see him sticking up for his teammates. Maybe not quite in the same way he did, now likely dealing with a pretty lengthy suspension. The MLB will review this, obviously. Probably Jose Siri, I'm assuming, will see a suspension of some kind as well. I really do hope Freddie Peralta doesn't receive any kind of suspension. They're going to review the hit-by-pitch call, and if they are able to determine that it was intentional, they will likely give him a suspension and probably miss at least 1 or 2 starts as well. So definitely something that you, especially Freddie, that you hope not to see. Not exactly what you want to see, the way in Abner Uribe reacting, but nonetheless you can appreciate the fact that he was sticking up for his teammates. And then secondly, how about Rhys Hoskins getting right in the middle of the altercation once again? He was obviously in the middle of that altercation with McNeil of the New York Mets in that opening series in New York, but he was right in there trying to defend Abner Uribe, kind of staring down Jose Siri again in this case. And you just love to have a guy like this that stands up. He doesn't back down from a fight or any kind like that. So really doing a good job sticking up for our team and for the players. So like I said, Brewers bounced back in this one. So far, evening the series at 1 game apiece before the rubber match starts this afternoon. And just one other thing that I wanted to talk about here regarding these 2 games. Obviously, a lot to talk about, a lot of things to uncover, and some controversial topics to talk about. But I really think Pat Murphy is endearing himself as a very appreciated manager in the Milwaukee Brewers system. I personally liked him from the get-go. I think that it was a little bit expected once Craig Counsell left that we already had a head coach basically waiting as an assistant coach. He had managed for a season with the San Diego Padres and had a lot of success in his college days coaching as well. And so I think this was the right move. I did think maybe there was an option for the Brewers to look for a younger manager as well. But I really do think they chose the right decision, and it's showing up here. I just think he's doing a really good job. With the ejections, he's putting himself out there. He's showing the frustration through this rough stretch of baseball that the Brewers have been going through. He's kind of endearing himself to the team and really showing that leadership and competitive atmosphere that the Brewers have had for the last several seasons, and continuing that, and basically rallying around the players and trying to earn some praise from the fans and players in the way that he's reacting. So I really do think he's done a really good job of this. I think he's coming out and arguing in the right manners, And I think he had the right to get as frustrated as he did in these last couple games. Now going 3 games in a row, we've had calls by the umpiring crew that have been significant decision makers that have all gone against the Brewers and have really been a big factor in deciding especially Sunday and Monday's game outcomes. So I think another thing of frustration from my standpoint is I feel like the umpires, when they make calls like this, need to be a lot better at clarifying what the calls were. Not at one point in any of these 3 games, in Sunday's game, Monday's game, or Tuesday's game, did they come over the sound system and let the fan base and environment know of the call that was being made on the field, and did not give any clarification as to what the determination of the call was. And I think this is another thing that's just really frustrating, is the fact that there is no sort of clarification of any kind to anybody to know exactly what was said and what the umpires determined as the call. So I think that's something that they need to work on. The microphone is there for a reason, to let the fans and viewers at home let them know what is going on. And so why aren't we using that? I don't understand why we're going to have it if we're not informing the audience as to what's going on in these games. So moving on from that, we will dive into a little bit before we wrap up here just of the matchups we have coming up. As previously mentioned, we'll have Zach Eflin versus Colin Rea in this one. Colin Rea, hopefully he'll be able to bounce back and collect the victory in this one after a rough start against the Yankees in his last outing. And ultimately, hopefully the Brewers are able to win this one and even out the homestand at 3 games apiece. So far, are 6-7 at home this year, and hopefully we can bring that average back up to 500 baseball at home. Definitely would like to see a little bit of a better record at home, but with some of the teams that we've played at home so far this year, can totally understand why we're sitting at 500, playing some really good teams at home in the Padres, Yankees, even going back to the Mariners and whatnot earlier on in the season. So hopefully they're able to collect a victory here this afternoon and even out that series before moving into a tough series coming up here against the Chicago Cubs on the road. So Brewers still hold a half-game lead right now. Cubs ended up taking the lead for one day when the Brewers lost on Monday and the Cubs beat the Mets on Monday, but a little bit of a flip-flop. Brewers win last night, Cubs lose last night. So the Brewers reclaim the throne right now at a half-game lead in the NL Central. So, but yeah, going to be some exciting games this weekend. Moving into a little bit of those matchups here before we wrap up. On Friday, we have Joe Ross looking for a bounce-back start for the Milwaukee Brewers. Hopefully will give us a little bit of length and a big day off coming for the Brewers on Thursday as well to freshen up some of the bullpen. But hopefully Joe Ross is able to have a good start in this one. Cubs pitcher currently is undecided. Saturday, we'll see Jameson Taillon for the Cubs going up against likely Tobias Myers for the Brewers. That hasn't been listed right now, but I'm assuming Tobias Myers will be the starter for that game. And then in Sunday's game, we'll have Bryce Wilson going up against Javier Assad for the Cubs, who is off to a really solid start to the season at 2-0 with the ERA of 1.97. So the one thing that I think is really good for the Brewers in this series, pitching-wise, is the fact that they don't have to face Shoto Imnaga for the Chicago Cubs. He will be facing the New York Mets here later tonight, so likely won't be seeing him, probably won't make his next start until Monday or Tuesday. So just a really nice thing. He's been dominant, ERA currently under 1. He's sitting at a 4-0 record, so hats off to him for having an excellent start to the season. But I'm not going to be frustrated by not having to face him in this series whatsoever. So hopefully, like I said, Brewers are able to bounce back here this afternoon again, collect another victory, get on a little bit of a winning streak, and hopefully just start playing some better baseball overall. I do think the Brewers right now are in a stretch of not playing their greatest baseball, and the fact that they're still able to get on some small winning streaks and play some decent ball still. So I think hopefully the Brewers are able to kind of get out of this funk that they've been in. Seems like, we win 2 or 3 games, then we lose 2 or 3 games in this last stretch. So hopefully they're able to get some more consistency, get back to kind of winning series in a pretty consistent manner like they were earlier on in the season. And hopefully they're able to do that here this afternoon with the win against the Tampa Bay Rays. So yeah, with that, like you guys know, Brew Pod Between the Lines podcast is always available on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, and other mainstream podcast sites. I can always be reached on social media using @brew_pod on Twitter or by searching Brew Pod Between the Lines on Facebook or Instagram. Hopefully we have a good game here later this afternoon before an off day tomorrow, leading into the weekend series against the Chicago Cubs. Hopefully you guys are able to rewatch some of the things that happened this week if you didn't get a chance to, and feel free to leave some comments or thoughts and reactions on what you guys thought about what took place here in these last couple games and some of the umpiring decisions in these ones. So with that, we will see you next time. Talk to you soon. And of course, go Brewers.